Hello, so welcome. I'm Dan Kunkel. I'm president of Oneness Incorporated. Thanks for all coming today. What's happening is I'm going to be speaking today about bioresonance therapy. It's really interesting because sound therapy is a really old therapy. It's been used since man started. Man with toning and yelling and stuff. Have you ever noticed that when you hit your toe or something, you'll actually just go yow and yell out? And that's actually a form of sound therapy. Well, what's happening is that I'm in the business of trying to determine scientifically how that works and if we can figure out the power of sound, since we know it's extremely powerful, and figure out why it works and the science of sound. So let's just kind of quickly review a little bit some of the theories and some of the applications of sound therapy right now. It's non-invasive. It's based, or at least in our company, we base it on the sound of the voice. And that's the mirror that we use in order to find out what's going on inside the body. It's been known to remove pain instantly. Sometimes we'll be working with clients who have like a back pain. We'll turn on a sound, and it'll be just the right sound that almost magically makes the pain disappear. It's absolutely phenomenal to see when you see it. The system's portable. It turns out that this is all you need to go around with and receive the sound therapy. And I'll kind of mention some stories about how that works and how this has really been beneficial for people. It can be self-administered. When you want the sound, you turn it on. When if you've had enough, you automatically just turn it off or leave it sitting by the bedside or wherever you are. And as you need it again or not, you automatically can learn to just reach for the sound and play it. It's non-toxic, but in fact we've got some studies that show that sound can actually be an aid at reducing toxicity. And it's much easier to do than inserting other drugs into your system to bring out the toxicity. And it's easier than having to have needles and the rest of it. It's inexpensive. It only costs, this box here is normally less than $100. And it can often be used without or on emotional issues. It's been found that the sound has a way of just absolutely relaxing you. Though I don't feel very relaxed right now, well, maybe I'll just try turning it on and see what happens. Finally, the cool part for those of you who are here and work or know about light therapy, it has this really cool red LED on the front. So, don't know. So let's see. I was first introduced to sound therapy, or to actually the idea of sound and color as a form of therapy or as a power horse, watching this one documentary years ago, like 10 years ago or so. And it was a documentary where they were in the jail system using and painting the jails this kind of off-color lemon green. And it turns out that they had done research and found that this color of green, actually significantly weakened you when you looked at it. And so it would take away the aggressiveness. These kind of men in jails who were rather aggressive would kind of be put inside, and just the color of the paint of the rooms significantly reduced their aggressiveness. That kind of just hit me, but I didn't have anything to do, to kind of bring that further. It's like, okay, I just stored that in the back of my mind and said, there's something to this. It's incredibly powerful. I don't know how to apply it yet. I don't know enough. We don't know enough. Well, then I kind of went on several years and didn't really think about that much until I saw a videotape of a man who was listening to these headphones or listening to this sound. And this gentleman was in a wheelchair and had MS. And the lady had asked him to try to raise his foot. So he'd kind of raise his foot, but without the sound, he could just barely raise it and it'd come back to the floor. She turned on the sound, and immediately the guy was able to hold his foot up in the air. And so I could see, I then had another area and a proof positive of how powerful the sound can be. Well, I kind of looked at the tools that were existent at the time for doing research and kind of following this up. it was pitiful, and it's one of the programs, computer software programs that I saw at the time, was one of the most unfriendly programs I've ever seen. Well, what happened is I happened to be friends with a practitioner who had started to work in the sound therapy, and she was trying to work with this software that was so incredibly unfriendly. My heart went out to this woman, and I said, here, let me write a software program that'll be much easier to use, much more powerful, and will meet your needs much better. So that's how I got into sound therapy. My heart went out to people who needed and were working on sound, who were researching sound, who didn't have adequate tools to do the job right. So since then, I've been doing sound I've written a couple different programs, software programs. I'm a software programmer by trade. I have an electrical engineering degree, as well as a minor in computer science from the University of Vermont. And I've been writing software for the past 7-10 years. So I kind of had a chance to use my expertise to write software like the program that you see to my right here. I first developed a software program called STS, which was kind of helpful, but it didn't meet all of the needs of the practitioner and didn't provide all of the information. I then went in and with the help and encouragement of these practitioners, the people that I was helping, we actually decided to rewrite another program. This is actually the program that you see beside me is called the Sound Assistant. And it's a comprehensive program that is designed to really help the practitioner of sound to apply it in their cases and really be a tool and an assistant in applying sound therapy. So why don't I kind of back up and share some of the experiences that we've had, using this therapy. This therapy has been just incredible on a number of cases. A few weeks back, I was, or actually in February, I was at the Global Sciences Show in Daytona, Florida. And while there, I met the gentleman named Boris Syed, who's a film producer. And he kind of runs around doing films and documentaries on the Egyptian pyramids and stuff like that. Well, what's happened is several years back, Boris had a knee surgery and needed to have one knee replaced, and his other knee was in constant pain, and he was getting ready and starting to think about having his other knee operated on. Well, he kind of met with us the night before our talk, and he's kind of, he's there, and we run his sound and run his voice print, and then we kind of program up a box with sounds specifically for him. Well, he kind of walks out going, well, okay, I'll give this a try, let's see what happens. Well, the next morning he wakes up, and for the first time in years, he doesn't have knee pain. And he kind of walks down, and at the end of our speech, he's kind of mentioning and telling people how this is. At the end of the speech, he jumps up and says, hey guys, this stuff really works. It's just like all these other things that you're hearing about, but it really works. And sound and frequency and color are the answer. And I think the direction that healing's going. So if you can imagine the excitement and the beauty of it, to really see kind of this sound stuff helping people. It's incredible to see what this can do and how it can help people. I've also worked just this last week with a woman who's been having a difficult time sleeping. Turns out that she was sexually abused as a child. And since that time, she's always felt fearful when she goes to bed. And it's like bed and sleeping is not a safe place for her. Well, I saw her like last week on a Friday and programmed up a box designed with sound specifically for her. she brings it home and plays it when she wasn't able to sleep. So the first night she plays it like 5 times and then 3 times, and she kind of sleeps a little bit. Well, last Wednesday she calls me up and goes, Dan, did you know I slept till 10:45 yesterday? I slept through the cars, I slept through the sun coming up, I slept through the buses, the noise, my son leaving, everything. This is great. And to be able to do this. And to top it all off, for the first time, I feel safe in bed. It's like when I'm listening to the sound, a cocoon just surrounds me. And I feel okay, I feel safe. And to have that kind of an emotional effect on people is absolutely incredible. And so I keep getting these kind of stories and these testimonials of how this sound works, and we haven't found that we're not 100% with it, but we haven't found that it doesn't work with anyone. It just doesn't seem to work with people in the time that they normally give it. You know, we don't seem to be 100%. It's not working yet. But I feel and believe that with experience, with practice, with more research, we're going to be able to get this to where we know what's going on, we know how it works, and it works just really smoothly. Now, one of the things that's been kind of interesting, even from last night and continuing on, I think you guys will all see that everything that's happening here deals with kind of frequency, deals with energy, deals with sound, with light. And those end up being incredibly powerful healing modalities. They're as old as our human history is. They've been used since the beginning of time. And yet we don't have scientific knowledge, or very much knowledge, to how they work and specifically what happens and what's going on. But we're collecting data at this point that's very incredible, and we're trying to track down what's happening with it and where it's going. Let me kind of talk a little bit now, or shift to a bit of how the software works, what it does, and some of its components. As you can see here, we have, let me switch to a gentleman named Stan here. He's a gentleman who has Parkinson's. And what we can see here on the screen is a display of his voice converted to his frequency energy patterns. And what's happening, or what we're looking for, is an even energy distribution across the whole display. What you can see here is, or what we would like to see, is energy, or yellow, going all the way across on all of these different levels. Okay, this is frequency that we're looking at. And what's happening here is like these bottom spikes here are ranging from 256 to 512 hertz. The next line is from 512 hertz to 1024, and each line here goes up an octave. Well, what happens is, so this is kind of a voice of someone who's unhealthy because there's just so much black space and black area. Stan came in, and as I understand it, when he came into the office, his hand was just kind of crinkled like this. Over the course of 2 hours, while giving him sound, testing his voice and stuff, my partner, Carl Parker, was actually able to get him to relax his hand, and he was starting to working on stretching it and stuff. And that kind of an immediate response is just amazing for these people who have these hands that are just locked up in muscles. Another example is Carl had this gentleman that kind of comes in to his office with his head tilted over from stress at work, and with just some sounds, and kind of working on the sounds and sound energy, and giving him back the frequencies that he needed that were out of balance. Carl was able to have him up and working on stretching his head and turning it from side to side versus kind of just being stuck here in this position. My partner, Carl Parker, has been working with a chiropractor, and even the chiropractor's wife had this kind of back problem where she just couldn't, just real pain, and the chiropractic stuff just didn't seem to be helping. So it turns out that everything in the universe has a frequency. If you think of the molecules and the electrons going around, they go around at different speeds, and everything has a resonant frequency. Well, the muscles in the back have frequencies, and we know most of the frequencies of the muscles. And what we did is Carl gave the frequency of that muscle, and it just increased the pain. It increased the kind of tension in the muscle. So he then gave what we call the inverse frequency to that, or the inverse frequency to that muscle, and that relaxed the muscle, and the pain disappeared just by listening to a pair of headphones and a pair of sounds. We found that you don't even have to have the headphones on your ears to be listening to them. You can. I was working with, or actually Carl was working with a peer of mine who has with a hip and who's had her hip replaced. And what he did was actually just put the headphones around her hip, and just the headphones being there was enough to remove the pain just before the woman and after this woman had hip surgery. So this kind of stuff is just incredible, and it works. What we don't know, or what I'm looking for, is the absolute science so that we can make it work 100% of the time. Right now, we're somewhere between 20 and 40. So please kind of stop and ask questions as they occur to you.
I'd like to, you said I programmed these sounds for people. What's the protocol? What's the guidelines you use? How do you determine what sounds? What's the protocol you use for determining what sounds need to be put into the unit? And can you tell me what the unit what it actually does and how the sounds are programmed? Is it like a reverse or the opposite of do you go by the voice print? Is that everything goes by from the voice print, or what?
Okay, thanks. That's a great question. So what we do is we have here the voice print of the client. And you can see that these spikes are places that the client has stuff going on. We've integrated a medical nutritional database in this software that actually gives us an incredible amount of nutritional information. Let me just kind of pull that up right now. Okay. And I'll make it a little bit smaller. I believe they're switching back and forth on the video, and so the video should be quite good quality. So what I can do here is actually just come in and point at one of these frequencies that this gentleman, Stan, had very prevalent in his voice. What happened is, kind of at this frequency of 299 hertz, Stan has this spike. And in fact, there's a story that goes along with this 299 hertz, and I'll get to that because it's a mystery that we're working on. And so what we can do is all we have to do is click on that frequency, and information comes up in what we call the database viewer, the nutritional database. And this brings up a bunch of chemicals, amino acids, muscles, elements, cell salts, everything that we have frequencies for, and displays it so that you can kind of follow your nose and track down what's happening and what the relationship with this chemical might be. So what we do then is we can kind of track this down, and then we'll use this information to program into the box by either giving the inverse frequency, a frequency that will pull energy out of here, or a reciprocal of it, or an electric note. Yes? Oh, wait a minute. I'm going to need everyone to go to the microphone.
Are you saying they're detrimental? How do you determine what's a detrimental frequency and what's a normal or a beneficial? Is that just something that's out of a parameter, it's out of whack there? If it's those spikes, the higher spikes, is that you're saying there's something wrong there? Or how do you determine what?
Let me kind of show you. You've seen this one here, and I'll blow it up so you can see it really clearly. Okay, this is the voice print of someone who isn't particularly healthy. The reason we know that is because there's a lot of black on this screen. There's just not a lot of energy. This person doesn't have their energy balanced. Looking at the print this way, we can go in and find out where we see these spikes like this is where the person has a congestion, where they have kind of a blocked energy point. And so what we want to do is we want to come back in with the sound and balance out the person's energy. Now, one of the things that we'll say, and this kind of coincides with all of our FDA regulations, is all we're doing in sound therapy is balancing out the sound, balancing out the energy of the body. It's just it tends to have this really neat side effect of people get more healthy, more happy, and their disease processes drop away as they get bounced. So this is an example of someone whose voice isn't very healthy. I'll now quickly pull up someone who has a very healthy voice in comparison. Okay, now this voice here, you can see has much more yellow energy going across. This voice happens to be the voice of my partner who works with this stuff all the time. And so he's constantly able to just get little tweaks and kind of balance his voice. And this is the effect. He still has places that are slightly out of balance and some places that are still missing energy. But because he works with this as much as he does, he's able to, and he just kind of gets these sounds as he's working on other people. His voice has ended up to balance out, and this is a sign of a healthy person. What we want to do is we'll take those spikes of an unhealthy person and use sounds that are the inverse sounds or other sounds that will take the energy away from those blockages and spread it out over the whole voice print. And this is what brings along the energy and balances the voice, balances the person's energy, and has the amazing, in fact, it might be able to be said, miraculous healing effects. Okay, let's go to another question.
I understand how on a given individual you would record their voice and do a frequency analysis and plot it. Now when you're dealing with chemicals or foods that they might ingest which don't have a voice, how do you get a sound print to have the information to work with?
Well, what we've done is worked off the molecular weights of chemicals, and in fact this week and here I'm looking at another potential formula or technique for finding the frequencies. But we've been working off the molecular weights to where each element, chemical, drug, we don't even have to actually have done tests on it. Just from the molecular weight, we know its resonance frequency. And I worked with this woman in Glastonbury, England, who kind of had this one client come in and she used one of my programs, and up come two major spikes in the voice. And she looks and goes, potassium and salt. What's going on here? She kind of goes, did you just eat something just before coming here? The woman goes, yeah, I just had some Doritos or something and a banana. She's like, good breakfast. But those kind of things just appear. That 300 hertz, that 299.97 hertz, has been appearing in people's voices in the Tacoma and Olympia, Washington area. We haven't been able to track down what that frequency is yet, but it's occurred multiple times from recordings on like 4 or 5 different people, not even at the same place or locale, the same house. So we know it's not some sort of artifact, but there really is like an energy pattern of the people who live in that area, or there's some kind of radiation or something like that going on. We've noticed, or one of the practitioners that I work with has sent a message across our email system, and that was saying that since those since the nuclear tests done in India, she's noticed a lot more people coming in with radiation, specifically radium. And so she's been starting to work with the sound and giving tones on the tone box here that she believes and has kind of found experimentally to have reduced that level of radiation. And again, take away the energy there, and that has the effect of balancing the body, even in the case of like radiation and radiation poisoning. So let's go for another question here.
How do you take the voice sample? What do you have them say?
Okay, it turns out at this point, we have the person say pretty much anything we want them to, or anything they want to. We have played with some other things of having them do like a little reading, or actually my favorite is to ask them a question that's very pertinent about their health. One of the parts of doing that is we are able to do reverse speech on the voice. And that's been known to give like amazing clues as to what's going on. An example of that is I was working with someone in Daytona, Florida when we were there. And he's been having hip problems and going back for hip replacement. He was working with me along with another one of my peers. And we kind of reversed his speech, and he was talking about, well, I don't want to talk about what's going on with my hip. You know, I don't care about that. I want to talk about such and such else. Well, we reversed his speech, and in the middle of it, he talks about being shot in the hip by an arrow. And it's like it didn't happen to him, but it might have happened to one of his ancestors, or you know, somehow even just maybe he saw it in a movie, or you know, something like that. He had a connection, an emotional connection with that. And that was kind of coming up. And again, I believe with this technology and its proven effectiveness with emotional things, that balancing the voice, as well as balancing out the physical problems, balances out the emotional problems. And it's common, and I believe I don't have to do too much to prove this, that I believe that physical problems actually start as emotional problems. And so rather than doing the allopathic thing of, hey, let's go after these physical stuff, let's go right back to the source. Let's go to the emotional stuff and balance the body, and these physical things will tend to drop away. I'm noticing a lot of heads out there nodding with that, and I think that's really key. Let's go to another question. This is great.
Have you noticed any diagnostic ability to deal with people's activity patterns, for example, a criminal or some incestuous relationship or other kinds of things that may be detrimental to society?
I firmly believe that this software and technique can find those kind of emotional patterns going on. I have a friend that, actually it's this friend Stellaris, who was the one that wasn't sleeping that I saw last week. And she's mentioning, you know, I can actually hear as soon as a woman comes in who's been having emotional trauma from a sexual abuse standpoint, and I can just hear it in her voice. And she kind of just personally can actually hear that thing. And she goes, yeah, and once they deal with it, that kind of part, that grating on their voice sort of disappears. So I'm sure it's there. All we need to do is research that, and we haven't had the time to be able to do that.
I'm a graphologist, and I know that there's very much a connection between just handwriting and the type of personality that you have. You can tell an awful lot about a person just from their handwriting. It seems to me like this is the same kind of thing with some radionics tied in with it. The larger the database of people that you've tested, you can tell more from that database because you can overlay them, and you can do clinical research from that. The software that you've got is in its, I guess, pretty much still in its infancy.
Not at all.
Not at all?
No.
What revision is it?
It's revision 1.5.
Okay,
but
it's down the line. Can you teach someone how to diagnose using this software? Is it very difficult to, for example, if you wanted to go into this kind of a business, you can teach them to do that?
That's great. Thanks for this question. Let me cover a whole bunch of that stuff. It's not difficult at all. What we do is have first-level training courses. Normally they'll run from a Sunday to a Saturday with, or even we may get it down to Monday through Friday. And they're available all across the country at various times. We have a couple coming up in Denver. I believe one starting like August 27th or so. If we get enough people in this area, we can send a teacher down here and do one in this area or some area that's convenient. Just for kind of people on the tape, let me quick give a few of the details. We are at Oneness Incorporated. The address for us is 14150 Northeast 20th Street, Suite 121. Bellevue, Washington, 98007. Our 800 number is 800-734-3588. I can also be reached at 425-747-8611, or Dan Kunkel, DANKUNKEL, at oneness-inc.com by email. Okay, yeah, the two phone numbers are 800-734-3588 and 425-747-8611. Thanks for letting me include that for our listeners on the tape. Why don't I, whoops, I didn't notice that switched there. Let's just kind of review all the features of the software real quick, because that's kind of important, and the software just has an incredible number of features that really help. That last gentleman was asking, what kind of a database do you have? In order to be able to really collect information on this, you need to be able to kind of see all this information. So what we've done is the software, as you're seeing clients, collects information about those clients. For instance, here, we'll jump into the personal information file. And of this, what we're able to do is assign an alias to each of the clients that we see. This allows our clients to have names, numbers, anything. I can call a client Guinea if I want to. And that's all the information that gets sent back to a central database where we'll be able to compile the results of everyone from around the world who's using the system already. So then each time they come in for a visit, we collect additional information about how they're feeling. That's going to allow us to track what the effect that the sounds have had. For instance, if someone comes in with severe depression for a while, and suddenly they're coming in to see us, and now their main problem is a hurt thumbnail, we'll know that the depression has shifted, and we can use that information to correlate with the sounds that we've been given and kind of prove this scientifically. Finally, we'll come in and do a voice analysis, and that's done by just making a recording into the microphone that's connected to the computer. The computer records it. When you like the recording, you just press analyze, and it'll take about 20 to 50 seconds to go through the voice with a fine-tooth comb, perform millions of mathematical calculations, and determine the frequencies that are present in the voice. And that gives us kind of this voice pattern and allows us to find these energies. Next, once you have that, you can actually look at the voice using several different plots. Here's one where we plot it in a circular form, so you can actually see the relationships in the energy patterns. Something I've noticed that I haven't been able to track because it doesn't seem to be well known in other forms is we often have seen like a three-poled kind of deal going on, where someone will have three angles, all equilateral, of where their energy spikes are. I haven't figured out what that is. It doesn't seem to be very prevalent in society and stuff, but we're kind of cruising along. With information like this, though, we've been able to study, or the woman that I work with who lives in Glastonbury, Elaine Thompson, has been researching and doing a lot with MS clients. And what she's found is that there really isn't just one sort of MS, but there actually appears to be 4 or 5 different types of MS that's been categorized all into one because the symptoms are so similar. But it turns out there seems to be, or we've kind of been labeling them like a chemical MS, a muscular MS, and some other types of things, because they have different effects that we can see using the software. And so the ramifications of this, once we put the data together and analyze it, are going to be just phenomenal. One of the next great things that's just kind of just hidden in the program is the most amazing nutritional database that I know exists around and that's presently available. What we have here is over 22,000 substances. Here I'll quick look up Prozac. Now it turns out that Prozac, as you might know, if we click on it, happens to be related to depression. And so this database automatically pulls up Prozac and then pulls up the things that it's been known to work with or to have a connection to. These are conditions that you can have. Everything from heart trouble to eyesight to depression. So we can look up things from any place that we want. We can look up like Prozac like I just did and look up any of these 22,000 different chemical trade names and chemical, there's like over 5,000 chemicals, sounds, cell salts, amino acids, everything, and see what it connects to. Or we can have someone who's come in with the problem of, say, depression, and lo and behold, everything, including Prozac, will come up on the other side of substances, of things that have been known to work with it. So this database lets us very quickly work with the client and track down a bunch of information. Now, one of the great parts about this is that you can come in and kind of take the training to learn how to use this, but that doesn't give you all the nutritional information you need. We can't cover that all in 1 week. So the software takes care of it. It really is a sound assistant, and that down here at the bottom, it suddenly talks about, and I just clicked on it and blows it up, it talks about Prozac. It tells about the things that you would like to know if you had spent years of research reading all sorts of nutritional books that are available. All this information is kind of compiled and been researched, and it's just all put right here at your fingertips using the software. I don't know how, this is perhaps one of the things I get most emotional about, is this database is just incredible because it has so much nutritional information right at your fingertips that can be just invaluable for helping you when it comes to finding out what's going on with your clients from a nutritional standpoint. Next, what we have here is we have a connection that talks about, a box that actually discusses the connection between Prozac and depression. So you can kind of find out relevant information about this. All this information is here in the computer so that as a practitioner of sound therapy using the system, you don't have to be a rocket scientist and spend all of your time researching books and researching this information. It's right here as you need it with the client right there. You can kind of pull it up and read about it, and it's just right with what you need to know at the time. So it's just incredible. The final part, the part that I just find most amazing, is in addition to having the connections between like depression and Prozac, we also have put together the side effects or the relationships between different substances. So example, St. John's wort has a relationship with Prozac, and we can just look right here. The Prozac serotonin inhibitor and its side effects are inferior to the nature of St. John's wort, which is a herb-based antidepressant. So here what we've done in this database is also connected up different substances and the side effects of them. So an example of this is if we look up vitamin C. No, it doesn't have a spell checker with it. So let's see. So here's all the things that vitamin C has effects with or has kind of relates to. For example, vitamin C and iodine have a connection. And this information is just available. And that way what you can do is when someone comes in and they're having poor eyesight and you kind of track it down to vitamin C, you can then pull in and look at the things and find out that like vitamin C needs magnesium in order to be effective. And so you can track things back to really find out what's going on with the client. So this information I find is just, it's a fabulous piece of the software. I have just a few more quick functions of the software to cover, and then I'll go back to questions. Now, have you ever noticed that scientific names for muscles are sometimes hard to recognize, especially if you're looking through the database and one comes up? Well, what we've put together is this tool, this little muscle man, that lets us actually track down where the muscles are. And you just kind of look up, and here's like the gluteus maximus, and you see it highlighted on the person's body. That way, for those of us who don't happen to know where all the muscles are, the software just brings it up so you can kind of point to it and know what's going on with your client. Next, we have found an astrological connection between sound and frequencies and kind of when people were born. And in fact, it turns out that most people have even heard of this. Do mothers or any of the mothers here know what it's like when their child cries? It's almost like you can have other noises that are even louder than your child crying, but you hear your child crying and it just pulls to you. That's because the child's crying, according to some research that was done, the child's crying in a note that like is screaming mom. And it's mom's favorite note. And what happens is the child has learned that by doing this, they get attention faster. And it really pulls to the mother or to the primary, and this will shift to the primary caregiver as the child grows, and sometimes it actually goes to a note between the two, the two parents. And so there is a connection. That frequency has been reported to be kind of related to astrology and exactly the position of the sun when you were born. So that kind of thing of, well, I'm a Pisces or something, has an effect with the sound that really calls to the mother. We don't have as much proof as I'd like on this, but the initial research that we've done is just phenomenal, and it's there. It's kind of an aspect of the program that you can work with or you can go by. It turns out that when you look for the answers of what to program into this box that will help a client, you can go from you can take just about any path you want to. Carl Parker currently is working on ways of using Chinese medicine with this system. And he's using kind of some of the Chinese rules of water, air, fire, earth, and watching what frequencies are high and low. And he uses that to get to the answer of what frequencies will help the client balance their body. You can use muscles. I have one woman that kind of does muscle testing with this. And by doing that, she's able to get to the frequencies that help this. You can use the nutritional database and nutritional information. You can use cell salts. You can use amino acids. You can track down what the body needs with the software using a variety of materials or directions. And the really neat part is that you end up getting to the same answers. The final couple of things is you have a Tonebox Programmer, and this is the piece of the software that you use to actually load up this Tonebox. One of the neat things about this Tonebox is it can generate up to 4 frequencies at a single time, but it does so with over 1/1000th of a hertz accuracy, which is just incredible. I think that's going to be the accuracy that we need in order to bring this to the reliability factor of 100% that I'm shooting for. So now let's kind of go back to questions.
Are there any correlations between the sound therapy work and the work of Royal Raymond Wright? And have you tried any of Royal Raymond or Wright's frequencies on any patient?
Okay, there are absolutely, most definitely connections. That's something that we haven't followed yet. What I'm hoping for, what I expect to happen is someone who's very experienced with using the Rife system will also try out our system, and they'll do the research to see how they overlap. Because everything, frequency, sound, light, it all comes from frequency. And it's incredibly, incredibly powerful when it comes to healing. Okay.
What has more effect, what you try to concentrate on and develop regarding the frequencies, the high spikes or the empty areas? What do you kind of work, what do you determine which ones need to be helped and which, then find out what, like mineral or herb or whatever needs to be utilized. And that lady that had the problem you were talking about before, I guess she was abused when she was younger. Can you put her graph up and show us, pinpoint where you said, hey, this looks abnormal, this, and also there's a, the Soviet Academy of Sciences wrote a book, which
Okay,
we might-
let's just go with one question at a time. So what you're asking first is where, what do you do? How do you kind of start doing this? Well, one of the simple ways is to go from these high points in the voice and actually give the sound that's opposite. It's easiest to see which sound is opposite if I pull up this other chart here, the overview chart. Okay, this chart here, what we'll do is like when they have a high point, for instance, let's say here's a spike in this person's voice. Okay, here's a point where he has energy concentrated. Well, just by looking at this, since we've made a map of sounds and octaves of sounds to a circle, all we do is go from one side where the spike is and give the sound on this other side. And we've found that to be incredibly effective. In fact, that's the thing that took the pain out of the woman's back. That's often what we do. The way I equate it is, imagine you were making a football field and it was kind of lumpy. What we want to do is take the bulldozer out and not try to bring in dirt and fill in the holes. That takes a whole bunch of time and you need to bring in a lot of dirt. Instead, we take out a bulldozer and just blow off the high points, the little hills, and shove that dirt into the valleys, and it lets us even off the field and even the energy very quickly.
What about the blank areas?
Okay, the blank areas actually aren't blank. It's just we need to look at them at a different resolution here. And what they show is little points where the problem, or the way my partner puts it, Carl Parker, is they show the symptoms. So he'll kind of track some of those low spots. And sometimes what we'll do is, like in this case here, we're trying to get rid of this high. We'll actually come down to this little spike or low spot in this area here that's close to the opposite, and we'll actually fill in energy there. That's also been known to be effective, and this is a little bit where the experience, knowledge, and training that you receive helps to give you clues and ideas of how to most effectively give back the sounds that the person needs. Then you also can bring in the nutritional information, overlap that on top of the voice, on top of what you know. And if they have a sore muscle, you can bring that information in. And you bring all of this information that's available in the software to bear on the questions and on the person and what they need.
If you could comment on tomatis, sonatus, and some of the history and background, perhaps that would be helpful.
Unfortunately, I can't comment very much about it because I don't have a whole bunch of information. One of the things that tomatis is famous for saying is that you cannot hear sounds that you can't create. And we kind of go the other way of that you don't create sounds that you're out of balance in. And so that's one of the great effects that we have on this is by balancing out the person's voice, the person's then able to create and hear all the different frequencies. And it's part of the balancing function. We're kind of running out of time. Let's go for this last question.
Okay, can this be used as a form of a lie detector? Can you tell the honesty and sincerity in a person's voice with the system?
Okay, I believe that you can. Unfortunately, that's something that we have not calibrated for, and so there's a new software program out called the Truth Detector, or what's Truster, yeah. And that's what they've done is kind of a similar type work. I haven't seen the actual algorithms that they used, but the information is in here. There's something, I don't remember the exact name, but it's like a 12 hertz signal that your throat vibrates at when you're stressed or not stressed. And so they were able to take some of the Watergate case studies, play back the tapes, and do this analysis looking for very low frequencies, frequencies around 12 hertz, and use that as a type of lie detector. And I hear that was rather effective. So it's like the information is embedded in this, We haven't done the research to put together, to correlate lying versus truth versus what frequencies come up on the screen. But I believe, from what I know and from history in lie detection, the information's there.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that kind of does it for today. I want to thank you all for your attention, and please give us a call, 1-800-734-3588. Good night.
I'm sure we could hear Dan talk for a long time, have questions, but we'll have to get into more of that later. I'm Ted Curtis, and I've been asked by Steve to do a little transition here. We'll have about a 5-minute break, and then while we get ready, and we'll have Terry Hull, and he'll talk about neurofeedback. Terry comes to us from San Diego.